Good Freedom Friday, coming to you live from the Conservative American headquarters out in Syracuse. Big news today. Big news out of Washington. The Supreme Court has released its ruling on Roe versus Wade, and has overturned that. Huge news if you are a lover of having a better moral fabric for this nation, and for following the Constitution and what the Constitution was set up to do. Um, Also, a huge win in terms of firearms rights and your right to be able to protect yourself. First, we'll go with the big decision that everybody's talking about. Unless you've been under a rock, you know that the Supreme Court took up revisiting Roe versus Wade, and they overturned it. Um, this is something I did a video on a while back, and the whole premise behind Roe versus Wade was 100% flawed. They came out and basically gave an opinion on the merits of being able to have an abortion, and which is fine, but constitutionally speaking, um, they erred hugely by codifying law, making law that said you can get an abortion. You've got the right to do that. Um, so here's where it's flawed. The American government is set up in three branches. You've got the executive. The executive branch is there to enforce legislative laws and push those to the courts for further evaluation and processing. That is their whole purpose, is to carry out the law, to follow the laws, and enforce those. You've got the legislative body. They are entirely responsible for writing those laws, for making laws. Um, and then you've got the judicial branch, which is there to interpret the laws, to execute judgment on violations of those laws, and to examine the constitutionality of those laws. The whole premise is that you have three branches. They're all separate, but they're all equal. So one branch can't completely override the other branch. And it's this balance of powers that is paramount to freedom in a free society as such we live in. Um, Whether or not you agree with abortion or not, I'm not even going to get into that. Everybody knows my stance on it. I think it's absolute shame that people think that they should be able to go out and do this, and are fine doing that. You've got this uh, death cult of communists that just follow behind this and act like it's the biggest thing. One of the big things that they pull out is, well, these cases of rape and incest. Well, let's be honest; those fall into a very selected minority percentage of abortions that take place, and I'm not going to debate the merits of those. I think there is room for exception. But what the court's decision did was it said the judicial branch has no authority to codify law. And that's exactly what they did in the Roe versus Wade ruling. They codified law that did not exist. They are expressly prohibited from doing that. That falls within the legislative body of the government, not the judicial. Um, and even going back to when the Constitution was founded, there was no mention of abortion in it, or a right to abortion. And there were, at the time of the Constitution was being put into place, there were already laws back then restricting people from having abortions. And so to say, well, this is a modern day thing that they could not have predicted is malarkey. Just isn't. So great news for freedom, for the Constitution, that it was followed here, and those powers get pushed back to the states. There's about a 50-50 split on states, where maybe half of the states are going to have trigger laws that go into effect that will ban abortion or limit it in one way or another. You've got another half of the states that aren't doing anything about it. So it has nothing to do with abortion as much as it has to do with the constitutionality and the powers of the judicial branch, and the fact that they are expressly prohibited from enumerating and codifying law. They cannot do that. Big win. So now it falls back to the local level, and local level government is always better than federal government. because it's closer to the people. It has to be more accountable to the people. And you even Joe Biden came out today after this was released, and even Joe Biden said this is not something that I can change with an executive order, and he's absolutely correct because the executive branch cannot codify law any more than the judicial branch can. So for once, Sleepy Joe is 100% right. He can't. He is prohibited expressly from drafting executive order that would do that. You cannot do that. That is left to the judicial or to the legislative branch, and the best legislative branch to determine that is the local state level. So there you have it. It's overturned, and these things can be fought out in state legislative bodies in the coming days, weeks, months, years ahead. The next big win was a case that got brought up, and it had to do with New York law, which New York is a show cause. You have to go forward and show cause why you need to carry a concealed firearm. And this is disturbing because if you're a 110-pound female that works late nights and you go to your car in the darkness of night when many predators are out, that's not necessarily going to be a good cause for them to have to issue you a concealed carry permit. And they're very hard to get in New York. They're very, very limited. Now, on the other hand, if you are a hedge fund manager or something like that, and you say, well, I've got all this stuff going on, I'm a high profile target, they'll probably issue him one. But if you are a single mother with 2 or 3 kids at home and you're working 2 jobs and you're the sole provider, you're the sole person to take care of those kids, they're not worried about that. That's not good enough cause to protect yourself. So this is a huge win. This is basically saying that this law that's been in effect in New York from 1911 is draconian in nature. It is unfair, and it violates the sanctity of one's ability to protect themselves. So they're kicking and screaming. This law's been in effect since 1911. What good has it done? People in New York have been subjected to violent gun crime at alarming rates. They're certainly not as bad as some of these other big deep blue cities with similar problems. But these laws clearly do not stop people who are hell bent on going out and committing violent crime against others from doing it. It's just not. These people, even when they get picked up and they're already a 3 or 4 time loser, they're a convicted felon, and they are restricted from owning a firearm or possessing ammunition, they're doing it anyway because they know especially in recent times, the New York justice system, it's a revolving door. You have all this stuff that they've done in the name of bail reform. These people can go out and commit a violent crime with a firearm and be back out on the streets in 24 hours, and it does happen. The people who get hemmed up on this, and the people who really get these laws that are on the books, who they actually go after aggressively. It's the 35-year-old school teacher that's traveling on the East Coast, and she unwittingly travels into an area where there's these draconian firearms restrictions, and somehow comes into contact with police, and they find out that, oh, she's got a firearm in the trunk, or loaded firearm in the trunk, and it's violating one of these local state laws or city ordinances. They will hammer those folks. Those folks will lose their job. They'll lose their livelihood. They will end up setting time in prison. Far more likely that that's going to happen to them than some of these trifecta losers out there that are just scourges on society, that are preying on the honest, hardworking men and women. If these laws were effective, then New York and many of these big places would not have the firearms problems that they have, and it's the same with drugs. If drugs are illegal, well, of course, Oregon's, a few other areas are trying hard to change that, but with criminal element, if there's a will, there's a way, and they are very good at doing whatever they want to do. this law, the only thing it's going to change is that people, men or women, like I referred to, the 110-pound single mother walking to her car from work late at night, she is now in a better position to legally defend herself from these savages that are constantly out there night after night committing violent crime after violent crime and then getting released and put back on the streets. If if New York was so concerned about gun violence or violence in general, um, then they would have an honest discussion about what is broken with the judicial system there and what they can do to change that. And that would be enforce the laws that you've already got. Go aggressively after these repeat offenders. Knock off this nonsense of bail reform and all this good let's hug each other and feel good. No, they would treat them like they are violent offenders that need to be removed from society, and so that people aren't walking in fear and intimidated. You can't hardly get on a subway in New York without a substantial chance of some whack job slitting your throat with a knife. And these laws are only going to open avenues of protection to people that aren't currently carrying guns and doing bad things. And those people are the law abiding people. And they're afraid to carry a gun because they know, going back to what I talked about with the school teacher, that if they violate the law, their life will be ruined. They'll be left a burning shambles. But big news. It's going to be interesting to see in the coming days and weeks how this settles out. It sure seems like to me that on both of these issues, there's a lot of shrill communist left nut jobs that they almost, some of the things that they're saying and posting on Twitter and some of these certain elected officials. Boy, it sounds. I mean, using their litmus test, it sounds a little bit almost like an insurrection. They don't want to follow the court. They want to just kind of cherry pick what they want to follow, I guess. And I guess if it's for a left cause, you can do anything, and it's not considered insurrection. But anyway, great news for America in the face of so much nonsense that's happened over the course of the last few years. I think this is a huge win for everybody. And anyway, I'll wrap it up and hope everybody has a good weekend.